Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and today is Veterans Day, and this is the day we say thank you to those currently serving, those who have served, and those who have given their all that we may be free. And what an honor to have in the studio with us today retired Colonel Dave Dotterrer. He's certainly no stranger, but today he's in full uniform on this Veterans Day, and we want to talk to him about what it means to him and some of the stories that he have. And Colonel, nice to see you. And again, thank you for your service.
You betcha.
How you
Proud
doing?
to have done. I'm doing great.
Good.
Doing great. So Veterans Day is always a special day.
Oh, I would imagine it is, and it certainly is for all of us. I saw a little sign, I think we're all kind of quoting it today. It says, Thanksgiving is where we thank God for all the things that we have. Veterans Day is we thank those who made sure we have the things that we have.
Right.
So we want to say thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, tell us, you're in full uniform today. You got a lot of medals there. Quickly, give us a little bit of history of your service.
Well, I served for 27 years. Came out of Oregon State University in the NROTC program. Went into the Marine Corps as an infantry officer. My first tour was overseas in the Far East, and I served in a battalion that actually evacuated Saigon. I was in the Vietnam War. My Vietnam service was the last couple of days of that, so I was right in the middle of all that chaos that you saw, and
wow.
And I was on board those aircraft carriers when they were pushing helicopters off the side, watching all of that. It was quite an experience for a young lieutenant. I was 23 at the time. I had a rifle platoon of 40 Marines. Actually in downtown Saigon, around the area, and
wow.
and then I went on to serve as at the ceremonial unit in Washington D.C., working in that issue. And then actually, what's interesting is I did that as a lieutenant, and then 20 years later, I went back as a colonel to command that unit.
Really?
So I did 2 tours at the Marine Barracks in Washington D.C., which is the Marine Corps ceremonial unit in the national capital. In between. Well, as my wife likes to say, in 27 years, we made 17 moves. So I don't want to go through all of those with you.
Yeah.
But for everybody who's had to make moves, you know what that is like, especially when you have children and everything like that.
Yeah.
And God bless the fact that my wife has been so supportive, and the kids learned all those things. And now my son's a Marine, and he's moving around doing exactly the same thing. So yeah, that's exactly right. So.
Wow. So today's a very special day. Obviously, you probably have some incredible stories, but have you selected a couple you'd like to share?
I like to tell this story. Toward the end of my career, I was the military assistant to the Secretary of the Navy. And the Secretary of the Navy is also the Secretary of the Marine Corps. So he actually has 2 military assistants. He has a Navy captain and a Marine colonel, and I was that colonel.
Wow.
Well, one of my jobs was to travel everywhere with him. And your viewers will probably remember toward the end of the 90s, John Glenn, who is a Marine, was a Marine, is a Marine, they blasted him back off to space again. Remember the space shuttle?
Yeah,
and he was
right.
in his 80s.
Yeah. Okay.
So he invites the Secretary of the Marine Corps to come down and watch this. And so we fly on down, and I will tell you that it's really cool to watch a space shuttle launch in person. Wow. I mean, it really is. So I'm standing there waiting for the liftoff, and a man walks up to me and says, hello, Marine. I'm Ted Williams. That Ted Williams. That Ted Williams. And what people don't realize is that Ted Williams was a Marine, and he also, John Glenn was a Marine fighter pilot in Korea. His wingman was Ted Williams.
Whoa.
They pulled Ted Williams out of baseball for 3 or 4 years. He lost 3 or 4 seasons. I mean, think what his record would look like if he had those 3 or 4 seasons back.
Wow.
to fly during World War II and also during the Korean War. So we're standing there, and Ted says, "Well, hey, Colonel, is it okay if I watch this with you?" And I thought, well, I'm just this kid from Eugene, Oregon. Sure, Ted, you're more than welcome to watch this with me. So we're standing there waiting for the liftoff, and completely unsolicited, out of the blue, Ted looks up at me, because he was in a wheelchair at this point in his life. He looks up at me and he says, Colonel, the most important thing in my life was not playing baseball. The most important thing in my life was being a United States Marine.
Wow.
And now that's the secular side of his life. I don't know what his religious beliefs are, but here's somebody who has achieved greatness that most of us, whatever our endeavors, are never going to get there. And at the end of his life, what was important to him was to be a Marine, and he was a veteran. Wow. That's what was important to him. And I just kind of let that sink in a little bit. So I like to tell that story. It's a great story for veterans, and veterans need to remember that, of where they've been, who they are, and what they've done, and they need to cling to that, because that clearly was what was important to Ted Williams.
What do you think of the military today? I mean, I know that's a huge question,
Well,
but the point is that it's getting a lot of criticism, and yet it's getting a lot of praise. And there are young people who are drawn to it. But looking back from the time you served to where it is today, do you see a difference?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I came into the military at the end of the Vietnam War, and I don't think Americans really understand how close they were to losing their military. It was a bad time. I mean, we had race problems. I'll tell this story. We know that if a young man or woman graduates from high school, that they're going to be much more successful. I had a rifle platoon of 40 Marines. 5 of us were high school graduates. Everybody else was just didn't made it through school and everything. The caliber is unbelievable. Turn around drugs and everything. So I actually, when I look back on my career, having worked through that and watched how we fixed that problem to get to where we are today, where the military is, if not the most, one of the most respected organizations in the United States today. I mean, if you look at those polls, that's what it shows. And that's very important. And we worked really hard at that to get to that point. Sure, we're not perfect. We don't claim to be, but when you look back over where we are right now, it's tremendous.
I was being drafted right in the middle of the Vietnam War, and I didn't get drafted. I had medical deferment, but I was on the bus with a bunch of guys. I'll never forget that day. I mean, I went off to Oakland, and here we go. And I'm sitting next to a guy who was a senior in college, and he was taken immediately. And we stayed somewhat in correspondence, and today his name's on the wall there at the Vietnam Memorial. And it's a stunning thing when you see those things. I'm wondering if we understand fully the price that's been paid for our liberty today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's incredible. The things we used to say in Marine infantry, life isn't fair. This is a hard way to do things, and the fact that we have people that are willing to step forward and do this, and your acquaintance there now he's on the wall. Yeah, I mean, we can't forget those people.
You can't forget them. Are we as ready today as we were when you served?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. In fact, I look back again at the beginning of my career. We are far better off than when we were. I mean, it was
just technologically alone.
Right, but the caliber of people that we have and their dedication to serve. I mean, it was all the veterans who come out of that era of the late the Vietnam War in the 70s and all will tell you they know that was a really tough time, because morale was so low.
It's a brotherhood that those of us who haven't served in the military and those of you who have, it's a brotherhood that's undescribable.
It is. I had got an email from an officer who served with me, and he went on to be a infantry battalion commander in Iraq, and he talks about standing in front of his Marines at an award ceremony, and he said, people don't, unless you've been there, you can't understand the camaraderie, and you can't understand the dedication to the point of death. I will die for you. You are my brother. I will take care of you. And those kinds of feelings are so deep.
So they are, and I don't want to go political here, but on the other hand, you just made the statement, you are willing to die for your brother. I mean, that was what you signed up for.
Absolutely.
What do you think when all of a sudden you get an order to stand down?
You're asking that constitutional question, which says one of the interesting things of what America has always done is when you swear your oath to the Constitution of the United States, and you're obligated to follow that Constitution. And you were taught in the military that it's at some point you may just have to say, you know what, that is an illegal order. That is contrary to the Constitution. And military people, particularly officers, are taught that. That's why you have this professional officer corps that stays apolitical, because everybody knows that don't play games with that. And that goes all the way back to George Washington. George Washington made sure that that was in.
Because two of the Benghazi deaths were men who broke away and went in to save their comrades. That's
right.
Quite a deal.
Right. No. And those stories are legion. I mean, I can. Well, there's a great story of a Marine in Korea where he was given an order over the radio that he knew the people in the rear didn't understand the situation, and he knew that if he did this, he was going to lose his Marine. So he just reached over, turned off his radio. And then and the guy went on to be the commandant of the Marine Corps, 4-star general. So it's not like you can't survive these. And those are important pieces.
What are you in for today? You're in full uniform. You're going to several recognitions today.
I'm going to 3 actually. I'm going to the Central Point. Fallen war heroes. I'm standing in. Dennis Richardson asked me to stand in for him, and Congressman Walden speaking there. Then I'm going at noon to the SOU Veterans Luncheon. And then at 2 o'clock, I'm also going to a dedication of a Korean War Memorial at the Memorial Park, Veterans Memorial Park in Medford. So there's lots of events going on today.
Well, again, thank you, Colonel, for your service and for your dedication. And thank you again for taking on another war front, and that's running politically. And we'll have you back on that on another day. Blessings to you.
Right.
Okay.
Blessings to you. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back, and today is Veterans Day, and we have some very special guests yet to be with us today. And right now, I want to take you back to May 2012. I had a rare opportunity to sit down with a gentleman by the name of Earle Tyerman. He's served in World War II and recounts some of his experience and memories of what is known as Utah Beach, the Battle of D-Day, and his incredible liberation of a concentration camp there during that time of the war. Since then, Earle has passed away and has gone on to heaven, and he loved the Lord Jesus Christ with all of his heart. But I had that just remarkable time together with him, sharing his story. So joining me now as we go back to May 2012 with Earle Tyerman. I am really honored to have in the studio with me today a good friend, Earle Tyerman. He is a gentleman that experienced the Battle of the Bulge. He landed on Utah Beach on D-Day, and he has quite a story to tell. And first of all, Earle, can I say thank you for your service and your bravery, and thank you for being with us today. Good to see you again.
Well, both ways, that's a privilege to have been in the service and to be here too.
Now, 87 going on 88, and as you look back, clear back to the Battle of the Bulge, can you believe today what the military has to work with and what you didn't have in those days?
Oh, well, on a cloudy, foggy day in the Battle of the Bulge, we couldn't see but just a few yards, and we could hear all the explosions from the German artillery, but we had no plane cover, whereas nowadays with the radar,
right, and GPS,
the planes can come in the deepest fog and deepest snow and pinpoint targets that we couldn't possibly, for 6 weeks, we never could see any more than 50 yards away.
All right. Now, D-Day was, in the Battle of the Bulge, it was pretty much known for its cold weather. It was freezing cold in that fog. In fact, many men froze to death.
We lost... Well, we had total 90,000 casualties in 6 weeks.
Wow.
But probably 10% were men that they got in their foxholes, went to sleep, and froze to death during the night.
Wow.
And then the medics would pick them up in the morning, just like an ice cube, frozen solid.
Wow. Now, how long did you have to wait where you were? Now, you were on Utah Beach. How long did you have to literally live in those conditions before air reinforcement came in?
6 weeks.
6 weeks. And there you were, just waiting.
Yes.
And
running out of food and ammunition. Yeah.
And they couldn't get supplies to you.
No.
So how did you manage that? How did you know what you had and what you may need?
We knew it was bad, and it was probably going to get worse unless the weather cleared. So what little we had, we portioned, which wasn't much. And some days 2 or 3 biscuits, about like soda crackers.
Wow.
And a little 3-ounce can of chopped pork would make last 2 days.
Wow.
So I lost 20-some pounds in 6 weeks.
Wow. All right, tell us about when the fog lifted and you were given the command to go. What happened?
Oh. All the Christians, at that particular time I wasn't a Christian, but I knew the Lord.
Yeah.
So it was, praise God.
Yeah.
Praise God. You know, He's answering prayer. And just within hours after the fog lifted, B-19s came in and dropped bombs on the railroad depots and the tank formations. P-38 fighter planes come in, and just in 1 day's time, they just wiped them all out.
The largest air invasion of its kind, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we have a picture of you just before you were deployed. You're a young man then. Here's the picture here.
Yes.
There it is up on the screen now. How old were you there?
18.
18. And what are you holding in your hand there?
M1 Grand Rifle. That was my closest friend outside of the Lord. That was my closest friend. I was unattached and raring to go for the military.
Now, you're saying of all the pieces of equipment that you had during the Battle of the Bulge, the one thing that the American troops had that was superior was this M1 rifle.
M1 rifle was the best rifle of any country in the world.
Okay, so that was, and then
that's the particular picture is the day that I received my expert medal for a score of 99 out of a possible 100.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, just to kind of get a perspective, you have a very rare picture of 3 generals. I want to put it up on the screen here and let our viewers who are watching on the Dove TV see this. I recognized the one in the middle as Eisenhower, and who are the other 2?
On Eisenhower's left, on his left, is General Bradley, Omar Bradley.
Okay.
And on the right is Joseph Collins, who was my direct commander of 7th Corps, 1st Army. And he later became a 5-star general and took Eisenhower's place as Chief of Staff.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
What do you remember most of that battle and perhaps the day the fog lifted? What do you remember most?
There's a lot of particular moments that I don't really recall, but one particular moment was I'm alive, and I got so many friends that were killed. My thought was, this is before I really knew the Lord, was why not why me, but why not me?
Mm-hmm.
If I made it this far, and now the Battle of the Bulge is over, that was a victory to me. I'm going home. That's when I knew I was going home.
Wow. I don't think even today we can get our head around that particular battle. You said 90,000 casualties. I mean, that is a number that we can't process
about
through our...
1,600 a day.
That's unbelievable.
I know. It's,
you know,
it's hard to fathom. Well, like I'd mentioned before, it gets to the point you never get over it, but you have to learn how to go through it. You have to learn how to step over bodies without knowing who they are, where they are, how it happened.
Because you had to keep moving.
Yeah.
Was it a matter, now you said something, you were fighting not for a matter of control, but you were fighting for liberty. There was something in the American soul of that era, your era, that you fought with the least amount of equipment. You just didn't have it.
Right.
And you would step over a body and keep going forward. What was that in your heart? What was that?
Well, we looked at a demon-possessed dictator, Hitler, and we know that the soldiers that were fighting for Germany were fighting for their Führer. And just as the Japanese were fighting for their emperor, we were fighting for freedom, for liberty, for morality, and dead set against the evil that we were faced with.
You know, few generations have been given the responsibility to do that.
Yes.
Your generation was given the responsibility to fight and protect liberty.
Yes.
Here we are, these many years later, and we're having to fight it in a whole new way.
Yes.
How do you view that? How do you view what you fought and stepped over your own servicemen and countrymen? Today, we seem to be fighting this thing within the walls of America in a whole nother level.
It's hard for me to understand the hearts of people today in high places that are more concerned in economic values rather than moral values. In my time growing up, my country was so important to me. And when we entered the war, before I was old enough to go in, if we went to a movie, they always showed a newsreel.
Right.
And when President Roosevelt was shown, sometimes in his wheelchair, and speak, the whole audience
would
stood and applauded.
Yeah.
Now that's Americanism.
That's Americanism.
Yeah, we don't have that anymore.
I'm sad.
Yes.
And I want to talk to you about that someday. But for the sake of time, we have one more picture I want to show our audience. This is you liberating a concentration camp.
Yes.
And this picture might be a little hard for some to look at, but all those are bodies.
In that particular scene, there's 3,500 bodies there, and then there's another 2,500 that were stacked up, ready to go into ovens and into
mass graves,
bulldozed, maximum grave.
Now, if you look to the right of that picture, those who are looking, you'll see kind of like a flag or a white, like a cot thing. That is, you are standing in front of that. Is that correct?
I was just taking a step forward there, with that white line across.
Right line. That is you there. And then off to your right is who?
Laura Bush's dad.
Laura Bush's dad.
Yes.
And you knew him, and you still get some correspondence from her.
Yes, I sent her this very picture because she had mentioned one time on television that her father said the hardest part of the war was the liberation of Nordhausen death camp. And so I had this original Signal Corps picture. So I got the permission, and I sent her a copy, and she wrote me a letter back, thanking me for it, and then we've corresponded a few times since then.
Was that the hardest part of the war for you? Liberating
It's the one that gave me the nightmares for years afterwards, yeah.
I see, again, this is a picture we can't get our head around. It looked like it just came from another world, another time zone.
It was, you know, actually, it's almost like a dream world. You know, people can't. I go to high schools, or like I went to, you know, a Cascade Christian school. Mm-hmm. I show this picture, and the children say, "It really did happen."
Yeah.
See, they weren't sure, and you see almost 100% tears that reaches people's hearts. Well, that stayed, you know, here in me for almost 10 years. I sleep on the couch rather than in bed because I was so restless that I didn't want to keep my wife awake. She would never complain, but I didn't want to. So, but
wow.
It's something you can't erase, this kind of stuff.
No, you can't. But it was, again, what was in you and your fellow servicemen's hearts and your spirit, the something inside of you, that tenacity, that tenacious.
Yeah.
We got to go, and we are fighting for liberty here. It is good against evil. It is.
Oh yeah.
It is the good spirit against the bad spirit.
You give everything you got in order to keep what you have.
You give it everything you got in order to keep what you have.
Yes, and you go back. Like I go back, I think, when I was a teenager, the morality was up.
Yeah.
I never once heard of a person being arrested in high school.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, Earle, we're out of time, but thank you for sharing with us today. This is so meaningful. Thank you for your service again, and I hope for many more Memorial Days you're around, and times in the future we can get you back and talk more about this.
Well, I thank you, and I pray for all those widows and widowers that are out there.
Okay, thank you. We love you. God bless you. That is the late Earle Tyerman and his incredible testimony of his service during World War II, and in particular liberating a concentration camp there, Utah Beach on D-Day. Well, coming up next, have you ever heard of Harley or Hap Arnold, General Arnold? Well, we're going to learn about him coming up in just a few moments on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Well, welcome back as we continue on our special Veterans Day edition of Focus Today. And coming up next, or we have next here today, Bill Yenne. He is the author of the recently published biography, Hap Arnold, or better known as Harley Arnold, the general who invented the U.S. Air Force. And he also has written extensively about the history of military aviation. And Bill, nice to have you with us. I'd give anything to see your library and some of your photos.
Yeah, it would be great fun to show it to you. I've got some wonderful stuff.
Oh, I'd love to see it. I'm an aviation enthusiast. Well, this is quite a story. What zeroed you in on Hap Arnold?
Well, I've been, as you said, I've been writing about military aviation for many, many, many years, and Hap's name is one that comes up consistently, and sort of a household word at my household, but realized that it's been many decades since there was a biography of him, and I thought he deserved it. He's you know, one of the comments that I like to make is that there's probably no other 20th century general, maybe even no general since George Washington, that is so universally well-liked within his own service.
Wow.
I mean, you go to Patton and MacArthur, and, you know, some people think they're the greatest thing ever. Others think that they're, you know, evil for various reasons, which we need not belabor, but Hap is extremely well respected within his own service.
Why is there so little information about him?
Well, it's that's something that I find bewildering. I've crossed paths with his name so many times in my work, but to realize that among the general public he is so much less well known. I'm not so sure, although I think you could probably go as far as to say that there's a lot of generals from World War II that nowadays are not so well known as time goes on.
Is it true that he received the 5-star general ranking twice?
Yeah, the way that worked was that during the Second World War, there were a number of generals and admirals that were given 5-star rank because just because of the sheer number of people that they commanded, and the British had field marshals, and we didn't have any equivalent rank in our services, so they created that. At that time, the Air Force, it was the U.S. Army Air Forces, was a part of the Army, and so he got his 5-star rank in 1944 as an Army general. And then after the war, when the Air Force that he had been building toward the creation of, when it was finally created, the independent U.S. Air Force, he retained his 5-star rank in a new service. So that made him a general in 2 services.
When did he learn how to fly?
1911.
Wow.
You might also ask who his flight instructor was, and I would have to tell you it was Orville Wright.
Wow. Wow. All right. So did he fly a variety of aircraft or what?
Yeah. He flew the variety that was there. In 1911, the Army did not have a lot of airplanes, and the Army was buying Wrights, and when they bought a Wright airplane, part of the package was that the guys who built it showed you how to fly it, and so that's how that started. And he did fly a variety of aircraft, and after the First World War, he went in and out of desk jobs because that's how you advance in the military. Wow. And he was his fondest memory was commanding the bomber fleet of the first wing out of March Field in Southern California.
Wow.
And after that, he was exiled to a desk as assistant chief of the U.S. Army Air Corps in Washington, and then he became chief, and that was his latter career path.
Well, you know, turning the U.S. Army Air Corps into a full branch of the military, into the Air Force, was no easy task, right?
Well, it certainly was not, but one of the first things that he was able to achieve was autonomy within the U.S. Army. That was with the creation of the U.S. Army Air Forces, which was an autonomous organization. George Marshall, who was the chief of staff of the U.S. Army, was an old friend of his and understood air power and was willing to do that, and they probably would have gotten an independent Air Force in 1941, but they had sort of other distractions going on at the time, which like a world war to win, and so they a lot of the nuances, like a separate logistics organization and all of that sort of stuff was postponed until after the Second World War was won.
So
which I was going to say, that war was won in no small part because of Hap's U.S. Army Air Forces.
Right. So what was the actual inauguration date of the U.S. Air Force?
September of 1947.
Okay. All right. And does his influence have a little bit of a post-war influence into the international airlines?
Well, interestingly enough, Hap Arnold built the world's first intercontinental airline. This was the U.S. Army's Air Transport Command, and it was the first truly intercontinental airline. It was a transport fleet, with regularly scheduled service to every single continent except Antarctica.
Wow.
And they had regular routes on the North Atlantic, the South Atlantic, across the Pacific, across the Middle East, across South Asia, across India, across North Africa, regularly scheduled transport service. And he built that. That was one of his pet projects as commander of the Army Air Forces. He had
what was the aircraft? What kind of aircraft did they use for that?
Primarily it was C-47s, which is the military version of the DC-3, and C-54s, which was the military version of the DC-4, the four-engine plane. That was sort of the queen of the fleet. They had a few constellations and used C-46s in some of the theaters on a limited basis, mainly C-47s and C-54s.
I got to let you go, but one other question. Was the Constellation the first Air Force One under Eisenhower?
Actually, the first, the history of Air Force Ones, the first one was the C-54 called Sacred Cow that took Roosevelt to Yalta. That was the first one, and then Truman had the C-118, which is the equivalent of the DC-6. But Eisenhower did have a series of Constellations.
Wow, interesting. Well, Bill, thanks for your time. Where can people get a copy of your book?
Well, you can always get it at Amazon. Just put in Hap Arnold, and it should pop up. My name is Yenne, Y-E-N-N-E, and I hope they'll have a chance to buy it and read it. And there's a lot of fun anecdotes in there that I didn't have a chance to talk about, and some great World War II history, and a lot of information about a guy that, if you're interested in military history, you ought to check him out.
All right. Well, we had a picture of it there on the screen, and you can check it out. Hap Arnold, check it out at Barnes & Noble or online at Amazon.com. Bill, thanks, my friend, and blessings to you, and thanks for giving us your time today.
My pleasure.
All right, see you soon. All right, we'll be right back here on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Well, we're back with this special edition of Focus Today on Veterans Day, and delighted to have with us back for a time together Rod Craig. He's the author of numerous books on history, and we've had him before: Declaration of Independence, Lewis and Clark, On the Trail of Discovery, and today his latest book, Lessons in Leadership from the Greatest Generation. There's a picture of it on the screen, those watching on theDove TV. And let me encourage you to check it out at Amazon or Barnes & Noble and get a copy of it, and because there's some great things in there. Hi, Rod. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. Nice to have you with us today. Well, of all the things you took on, there's so many stories on leadership from this great generation. How in the world did you compile this?
Well, that was really the charge, but that was also the fun part, you know, and a very inspirational thing, spending your time in the company of those folks. But I've for different projects over time, since really the 50th anniversary of World War II in the 90s, I have interviewed countless World War II veterans and people who've lived in that era, and it's been a great blessing to me and to spend time in the company of that generation.
Boy, they're passing quickly, and as we now see some of these stories just kind of fade away. I just had a gentleman on who served in the Battle of the Bulge and actually was part of a liberation of a concentration camp, and they just went in because it was the thing to do. It was evil against good, and where is that courage today?
Well, you know, they are passing from memory into history, and we're going to miss them, and they're going to leave a giant void in our culture. But thankfully, they have left us a great legacy of character and values and leadership, which is what I'm trying to do with this book, Lessons in Leadership from the Greatest Generation.
All right, let's talk about that, because can world leaders and modern leaders today learn from these leaders during the World War II?
Oh, absolutely. This was a generation that was remarkable for its discipline, its selflessness, its willingness to do its duty, dependability, patriotism. And there's a great deal to learn from them. And what I've tried to do in this book is to take 10 lessons in leadership that they really have personified as a people, as a generation of Americans, and explain and express those lessons in leadership in stories of people who personify those leadership traits who were members of the greatest generation.
Well, for the sake of time, Rod, go ahead and share a couple of those with us.
Well, I will. One who comes to mind is a naval commander named Dick Antrim, and I stood over his grave at Arlington National Cemetery just a few months ago, and he was a modest, unassuming guy. He was in the Navy when the war began, commanded a destroyer in the South Pacific that was sunk at the Second Battle of Java Sea, and he demonstrated a lesson in leadership then and how he managed to save his entire crew from the sinking of that ship. And then they were picked up by Japanese naval forces and were incarcerated in a prison camp in Indonesia. You know, the Japanese prison camps were about the worst place you could be. People were starved. They were tortured. If the officers complained, they could be beheaded. And this tells a story about this guy, Dick Antrim, this Navy commander in this prison camp, who saw an American naval officer who failed to bow low enough to a Japanese guard being beat to his knees and in the process of being beaten to death. And the story tells what Antrim did and how he responded, and which won him, by the way, the Congressional Medal of Honor and saved a lot of lives. But it illustrates a lesson that real leaders take care of their people. And so these are the lessons that come through there. And another story that comes to mind is a World War II veteran who's in this book, who actually was a friend of mine and who passed away just a couple of years ago. His name was Mike Fitch. He was a farm boy from South Carolina. He wound up in Charlie Sector, second wave, Omaha Beach on D-Day. That was about the bloodiest part of the bloodiest beach to be in. And the lesson in leadership that he demonstrated in that day on that beach at Omaha is, well, it reflects the very simple truth that the absence of fear is not necessarily an expression of courage. Real courage is doing what you have to do despite your fear. And that's what Mike Fitch did at Omaha Beach that day. And the lesson in leadership that's demonstrated there is that real leaders choose to be courageous.
That's the story we just heard also, where you step over the body of your comrades and you keep going forward.
That's right. And that's what he did, literally. In his words, he had to hopscotch over those troops. And then he spent the afternoon on Omaha Beach trying to knock out a German emplacement called WN-73, which had artillery and machine gun, and it was just taking a terrible toll on the Americans on the far right flank of Omaha Beach. And he and two other men, he was part of a two-man reconnaissance team, and they were joined by a third man, and They were trying to knock it out with hand grenades, which were bouncing off and not working, and then high cliffs on that end of Omaha Beach, and the German defenders were dropping hand grenades on them. So they designated one man to catch the falling German hand grenades and throw them out on the beach, while the two of them tried to knock out this installation. And they finally figured out that if they could ricochet their fire from their small arms, from their rifles, in through the porthole of this gun emplacement and ricochet it off the ceiling, then they could silence that battery, which they managed to do. But it's an incredible story of someone who demonstrates courage.
Do you talk about General Eisenhower?
I do. In fact, he's one of the lessons. He and Admiral Nimitz in the Pacific. Eisenhower, of course, is the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. And Eisenhower really demonstrated a great deal of leadership. But what the focus is on this story about him is kind of a little-known story. He is viewed as, of course, the architect of D-Day, and a superb job of the largest amphibious operation in history. And it was his conduct and leadership in World War II that eventually propelled him to be President of the United States. But what many people don't realize is that when the D-Day landings began and the paratroopers went in, Eisenhower had already written out a message to be released to the world if the invasion failed. And in it, he blamed no one and took full responsibility for the failure of D-Day. And of course, it didn't fail, but the lesson that's taught here is that real leaders always take responsibility.
Is that letter? Is that in your book where he has written that out?
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
But you know, there's something to remember. I think that we call these folks the greatest generation, and I believe they were. And when you talk to them, though, if you talk to any of them long enough, then they talk about how they were raised and about their parents. And they were raised by the last generation of Americans to grow up in the 19th century. And that was a century when the American traditional values, that Judeo-Christian worldview, those biblical values were so strong that the century was known as the Christian century.
Right.
And it's, it's no accident that this generation that we revere so much had those values that they were raised with that came from the last generation of the 19th century.
Wow. Well, I know you could probably talk a long time on that. We're just about out of time, and I want to get you back. This is fascinating. Do you think any of those leadership skills are surfacing today?
Well, you know, these are enduring values, these values based on those biblical values, on that Judeo-Christian worldview, what we call traditional American values. They last forever, and they will work for anybody who exercises them and puts them to work.
Amen.
And so that's what I hope that this book will do. It will preserve some of those lessons in leadership based on those values, and that will be a part of the legacy that this generation, this greatest generation, has left for us.
I got about a minute left. Tell us about Elaine Wright, if you can.
Sure. Elaine Wright didn't wear a uniform. She wasn't in the military. She was a volunteer in the USO, which was a nonprofit group that provided a lot of services for troops. And the most popular thing was the USO canteen. And she was a worker in the USO canteen in a little town in Nebraska that served, over the course of the war, millions of troops. And the story is told about her and how she worked so hard every day in that canteen, and then one day failed to show up because she had learned that her son had been lost in combat. But the next day, there she was serving those troops. And she said, I can't help my son now, but I can help someone else's son. And the lesson in leadership is that real leaders persevere.
Wow, fascinating. Rod, thank you. The name of the book is, or the title of the book is entitled Lessons in Leadership from the Greatest Generation. There's a picture of it on the screen. Let me encourage you to check it out at Barnes & Noble or online at Amazon. Rod, thanks for your work, my friend. God bless you. Keep up the good work, and we'll get you back soon.
Thank you. Blessing to be with you.
All right, God bless you. All right, again, take time today to thank a veteran. If you see one out there, if you know one, and if you are one, we want to say thank you for your service. God bless you. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. and you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us.